Europe's central bank just froze rates at 2% and declared policy is in a good place. If that were genuinely true, you and I would feel it in our daily lives. We don't. So tonight, I want to unpack why that neat, market-friendly soundbite doesn't square with reality, and why 2% isn't a victory lap. It's a glass floor. It looks sturdy. It sounds reassuring. But once they step below it, it's the public admission of an emergency. And the thing about emergencies is they don't schedule themselves around press conferences or talking points. They break through at the worst possible moment, and by the time officials acknowledge it, the rest of us have already felt it for months. Let's start with what actually happened. They didn't hike. They didn't promise more cuts. They simply drew a line at 2% and told everyone to relax. Meanwhile, the growth backdrop is more stall speed than soft landing. The gap between podium confidence and paycheck reality is widening in ways you can measure. Flat on a spreadsheet isn't fine when groceries are not flat, rent is not flat, childcare isn't flat, and insurance definitely isn't flat. Flat GDP plus sticky bills equals a slow bleed for households who needed actual growth, not semantics. And when people feel that pinch, they don't read policy statements. They change behavior. They trade down, they delay purchases, they cancel plans. Listen closely to how officials keep repeating good place. If things were truly so good, they wouldn't need to say it that often. The repetition doesn't project confidence. It projects convincing. And that brings us back to the 2% glass floor. Above 2%, central banks can pretend the patient is recovering, supportive, appropriate, meeting by meeting. Below 2%, they know exactly what happens to expectations. The optics flip from steady hands to break glass in case of emergency. That's the trap. They pause at 2% for as long as humanly possible, not because the economy is roaring, but because going below that line is an admission that it isn't. And we've all seen the pattern. A ritual of pause, deny, cut, promise, that's the last one, and then cut again later. It's not random. It's an irregular rhythm born from fighting the signal instead of facing the reality. The reality is that cuts soothe headlines far faster than they fix the root problem, an economy that forgot how to grow in a way ordinary people can feel. If your hours are getting trimmed, if your side gig is doing the heavy lifting, if your credit card balance is creeping up while your wage growth flattens, then a neat decimal point in a quarterly GDP release is not opening your wallet. Corporate America and European bellwethers are already telegraphing this strain. Restaurants that once printed money on brand loyalty are now discovering loyalty has a price point. Packaged food giants who banked on pricing power are finding out you can push a stressed consumer only so far before they push back. When a customer decides the fast casual burrito is now a grocery store burrito, that's not a vibe shift. That's the invisible hand smacking forecasts. And it's compounding with something executives hate talking about on camera: inventories. When surveys show sales slipping while inventories don't budge, that means product isn't moving. And if product isn't moving at current prices, cutting interest rates a quarter point won't make stale stock disappear off the shelves. This is how cereal cuts begin. Not because policymakers wake up one day and suddenly care more, but because the math corners them. Remember, rate cuts are a communications tool as much as an economic one. The music they're trying to play is confidence, but the dance floor is sticky. They hint at cuts to placate markets, they pause to save face, and then they cut again when the data makes the decision for them. If you feel like the cycle keeps repeating every few quarters, you're not imagining it, you're living it. There's another fracture that matters just as much as the 2% line: the divorce between stock market euphoria and consumer sentiment. For years, the two tended to move together. Rising indexes suggested better times, as some people felt a little richer, even if it was mostly psychological. But what happens when Main Street stops taking cues from Wall Street? We're watching that in real time. Indices can print new highs, yet people look at their bank accounts and feel poorer. That's a regime change. It means households are trusting their lived experience over the broadcast. And once that shift hardens, you don't repair it with a press conference or a forward guidance paragraph. You repair it with real growth that shows up in hours worked, in paychecks that outpace bills, in job postings that feel credible, and in prices that stop sprinting ahead of wages. And this story isn't bounded by a single currency zone. Trade-sensitive economies are wobbling. China's property overhang is an anvil that keeps finding new floors. Parts of North America hum one quarter and sputter the next. Services, along the backbone, the last bastion, are showing hairline fractures at the edges. Quietly frozen hiring plans, subtle hours reductions, efficiency pushes that everyone knows are code for do more with less. None of this looks like the dramatic plunge of 2008. It's the slow grind of an economy that can't quite catch a durable updraft. The drama is lower volume, but the damage compounds over time. So why cling to 2% if the world is this messy? Because the moment they cross below it, they admit the patient is not stable. They invite a conversation they've avoided for months. They invite the implications that more easing is not a victory, but a triage. And they fear the feedback loop. The more they signal emergency, the more businesses and households pull back. The more markets price in bad news, and the more the economy conforms to the story. In that sense, 2% is not just a policy rate. It's a psychological line in the sand, and everyone involved is pretending it's a beach when it's actually the tide line just before a storm. The next few weeks and months will matter in ways headlines won't fully capture. Holiday spending is a truth serum, not revenue. Units. Watch unit volumes. Revenue can hide pain for a while because price goes up. Units tell you if the customer actually showed up. If unit volumes are soft into and through the holidays, the glass floor creaks. Pair that with purchasing manager data. New orders versus backlogs. If backlogs shrink and new orders don't refill the pipeline, services stop absorbing shocks and start transmitting them to payrolls. That's when you see the last domino. Services layoffs, less dramatic than manufacturing cuts, but psychologically heavier because services jobs are where many middle-class households live. And let's be blunt, rate cuts don't create jobs on command, and they don't refinance debt for households who don't qualify. They can help margins at the edges, they can grease credit channels for the strongest borrowers, and they can buoy financial conditions enough to keep whatever still works from breaking. But they don't fix the inventory that's not moving, the order books that aren't filling, the hours that aren't being scheduled, or the families who've already decided the burrito is back on the home menu. That's why policy keeps arriving like a stutter. One step forward, one step sideways, one step back, as officials try to protect belief, at least as much as the economies. With a paradox, the folks in charge need you to believe things are okay, long enough for things to actually be okay. But belief without delivery expires fast. You can't tell people in a good place they're in a good place when their bank balances keep disagreeing. You can't tweak growth into existence. You can only grow into it. And right now, too many of the signals that typically precede broad-based growth, healthy orders, rising unit volumes, stable inventories, improving hours, are either soft or moving in the wrong direction. That's not panic. That's diagnosis. The glass floor can hold for a while. Stress can distribute. Messaging can delay. But if the weight keeps building, pressure finds the fracture. Here's what I'm watching so you don't have to stare at 1,000 charts. First, retail unit volumes versus revenue into and out of the holidays. Second, the spread between new orders and backlogs in services PMIs. Think of it like the cushion that keeps businesses from feeling every bump. If it deflates, hiring decisions change. Third, layoff notices in services and white-collar functions. The slow fade from we're optimizing to we're reallocating to we're reducing. Fourth, the language drift in central bank statements. From meeting by meeting to we remain vigilant to we will ensure conditions remain supportive. Watch the verbs. Watch the hedges. Watch how often good place quietly disappears from the script. If your rent, your wage, and your grocery bill aren't living in a good place, you already know the truth that the 2% line is trying to hide. The glass floor is about optics, not outcomes. It's about delaying the admission for as long as possible so that markets don't make the problem worse before policy can make it marginally better. But here's the thing. Nobody on the podium will say out loud. When the glass goes, it doesn't shatter neatly. It splinters. You get lurches, you get pauses, you get another lurch, because no one wants to be